But before we dive into the disturbing tales of the night, let me ask you, do you have the courage to stay until the end? Most viewers don't subscribe to the channel, perhaps out of oversight, or perhaps because after hearing these stories, they never slept the same way again. If you think you can handle it, click subscribe now.
My name is Michael. I'm 62 years old, and for almost a decade I worked as a night janitor at Smallwood Elementary, a primary school in a small town near La Crosse, Wisconsin. The school is old. It was built in the 40s and has that typical structure of light wood, narrow corridors, creaky stairs, and stuffy little rooms. Pretty by day, ... But at night, it's another thing entirely. My shift started at 10 p.m. and went until 6 a.m. The first week was quiet. I did my rounds, cleaned the hallways, and rested a little in the teacher's lounge. But in the second week, on a particularly cold November night, things started to get strange. I had just finished my round and entered a room on the second floor to escape the cold. I sat near the window, dozing a little, when I heard a loud noise of a chair dragging on the floor upstairs. I thought it was some homeless person who had come in to take shelter, so I went up quickly. The room was empty, except for a chair pushed to the front of the chalkboard. Alone, that didn't make sense, since all the rooms were locked and organized on my last round. I repositioned the chair and went back downstairs, and then I felt it. That gaze. When I turned around, I saw a figure standing in the window of the room above, watching me. Pale face, dark hair, black dress, and eyes that didn't blink. I almost fell backward. I ran upstairs, but the room was empty. The energy in there was horrible. The air was heavy, as if something was oppressing me. I went downstairs and locked the room. I barely had time to sit down before I heard chairs being thrown against the floor upstairs. That was the worst part. I heard footsteps of high heels, slow, echoing through the hallway above, as if a woman were calmly parading. Each step made my stomach churn. I went up there again, and when I opened the door to the room, the light went out by itself, and all the chairs were turned over. A chaos. When I went to leave, I saw something in the corner. She was sitting there, the same woman, pale, immobile, wearing an old button-down dress, just looking at me. I ran like a child. I locked the room and locked myself in the break room. I felt her walking down the hallway. I saw the shadow hover under the door, stopped there. Then I heard her footsteps going away. The next day, one of the older teachers saw me looking wrecked and asked what happened. When I told him, he got serious and said, "You saw Miss Ellis." According to him, Miss Ellis was the first teacher in room 209. Back in the 40s, legend has it that she was cruel to the children. She slapped papers on their hands, left students locked up for hours if they made mistakes on their homework. A group of students set up a prank by throwing a snake they found in the forest on her. She fell backward, hit her head on the corner of a desk, and died instantly. No one was held responsible, but since then, janitors and teachers avoid going into that room at night. I never saw her again after that night, but from time to time, I still hear the sound of heels going up the stairs. My name is Eric. I'm 38 years old now. But a few years ago, when I was broke and desperate for money, I ended up accepting a night security job at the Ashbridge County Morgue in rural Michigan. Before you ask, yes, I knew what I was getting into. I've always been the skeptical type. I believed we should fear the living, not the dead. And for 3 weeks, the job was exactly as promised. Boring, lonely, and quiet. I stayed on the outside, doing rounds and monitoring the entrance. But on a freezing Wednesday in December, something changed. I received a call from Dr. Carrington, the chief coroner, who had forgotten his cell phone at the front desk of the lab and asked me to take a look. It was close to 2 a.m. I grabbed my flashlight and went inside. Only a dim emergency light illuminated the hallway. I entered the reception area, found his cell phone on the table, and was about to leave, when I heard a voice, low, hoarse, like a whisper coming from the end of the hallway. Eric. I got goosebumps from head to toe. I looked in the direction of the sound, but there was nothing but shadow. My brain raced to find a logical explanation. Maybe someone had broken in. I wasn't allowed to carry a weapon, but I took the radio with me and followed, slowly, flashlight in hand. The light in the autopsy room was on. That bothered me, since, technically, no one else was supposed to be there. Everyone signs out with me. I knew there was no one else inside. That's when I saw the shadow of feet passing under the door. Someone was in there. The adrenaline kicked me into autopilot. I went to the door, but before I pushed it open, the phone rang in the reception area. I ran back. It was Dr. Carrington himself. He was pale on the other end of the line. He said, Eric, Are you inside the building? Get out of there now. I was the last one to leave, and I locked the autopsy room with a key. That light shouldn't be on. I explained what I heard, and he responded with a sentence that wouldn't let me sleep for days. Ever since we received the body of the kidnapped boy, I've been hearing things, whispers, footsteps. I didn't say anything because I thought it was stress. I should have called the police right then and there, but I don't know what came over me. Something was pulling me into that room. When I returned, the light was off. I opened it slowly. The air was colder than outside. Bodies covered by white sheets were arranged in rows. Everything seemed normal, until I shone the flashlight over one of the stretchers again. One of the bodies was sitting up, still covered by the sheet. I can't explain the feeling. It was as if my body had frozen in shock. I didn't scream, I didn't run, I just shut down. I stumbled out of the room at the exact moment that Dr. Carrington arrived through the side entrance. I explained everything. He went back in with me and asked me to point out which body had moved. I pointed and he pulled back the sheet. It was a young man. His face seemed to still carry the trauma of what he went through. Multiple cuts, bruises, the kind of thing you only see in movies or on the worst news pages. According to the doctor, that boy had been held captive for almost a month. When the family managed to pay the ransom, they handed him over, dead. From the moment that body entered the morgue, things changed. Strange sounds, voices, equipment moving. But what haunts me to this day is that that voice whispered my name. How did he know? There were no recordings. I reviewed the cameras, and nothing showed the body moving. After that night, I didn't go back. I gave my notice and stayed away until they found someone to replace me. I never accepted a night job again. Sometimes I wake up with someone murmuring Eric ... in my room, but when I turn on the light, there's no one there. My name is Mark. 2 years ago, I took a temporary job as a night security guard in a commercial building in downtown Rochester, NY. The place had 5 floors. Offices, accounting firms, small businesses, nothing special. But there was a strange rule in the contract. The 5th floor is off limits. The door will always be locked. Only the owner has access. I thought it was weird, of course, but it was fast money, and I was living in my car. In the first few weeks, everything was quiet. I did rounds between midnight and 6 a.m., monitored the cameras, ate my snack, and went back to life. Until one Friday, around 3 a.m., I started hearing noises coming from above. Knocking, sequential, muffled thuds, as if someone were kicking a door with their heel. I slowly went up to the 4th floor and stopped at the base of the stairs to the 5th. Up there, just a single steel door with 2 large padlocks on the outside, and the sounds continued. Thuds, thuds, thuds. I went up. I approached the door and said, "Is anyone there?" Silence. Then, 2 thuds. I recoiled. My heart raced. I went back to the front desk. 5 minutes later, my radio beeped. It was the building manager, furious. "Are you on the 5th floor?" He caught me on the cameras. I explained what I heard, but he was direct. "Mr. Verhoeven, the owner, demands that this floor remains isolated. Don't go up there again. If you want to keep your job." I was in that mix of fear and curiosity. 3 nights later, the sounds returned, but this time they were muffled screams. And I swear to God, I heard someone desperately banging on the door. I made the decision. I went back with a crowbar that they kept in the storage room. I went up to the 5th floor. The padlocks were there, but already semi-open, as if someone wanted to get out, or someone wanted someone to get in. I broke down the door. The room inside was huge, without windows, and cold as a walk-in freezer. There was a chair in the middle of the room, ropes on the floor, torn duct tape, and in one of the corners, a man. He was lying on the floor, tied hand and foot, with his face covered in bruises. He was the one making the noises. And around the room, glass display cases with mannequins covered by sheets, but they were people, or what was left of them. The man murmured, repeating, "Get me out of here, get me out of here, .. I helped as best I could, removed the tape from his mouth. He could barely stand. He told me, between sobs. It was Verhoeven, the owner. He brought me here after a business deal. He does this to many. Experiments. He keeps what's left. I wanted to use the radio, but I knew that would only call the manager. And I didn't trust anyone anymore. So we decided to escape. We went down the stairs, but before we reached the 3rd floor, the lights went out. Everything. And we heard footsteps coming up, heavy, measured. The man trembled, muttering, "It's him, .. He knows." He cut the power. We went back up to the 4th floor and hid in an old archive room. I locked it with everything I could, but the man came up, slowly, talking to us through the door. "You don't understand what you saw, ... It's necessary. You shouldn't have opened it." He tried to break down the door. I hit with the crowbar, pushed with all my strength. That's when the man I saved grabbed the tool and hit Verhoeven in the head with everything. We ran. We called the police. The authorities stormed the building and discovered the horror on the 5th floor. Fragments of bodies, refrigerators with human remains. Improvised surgical equipment. Verhoeven was arrested, convicted. I received anonymous threats for months after that. The company went bankrupt. The building was condemned, and it was demolished the following year. But there are nights when I wake up in a cold sweat with the sound of faint thuds echoing in my room. And sometimes I hear 2 thuds, just 2, as if someone was still there, waiting to get out. I don't like talking about this. I worked in security for years, and I've seen too much in this country. But what happened to me at the Rutherford processing plant, there in Clayton, Nebraska, has no earthly explanation. The factory was remote. A dirt road led to it, surrounded by nothing but dry cornfields and silence. It was built on top of an old abandoned warehouse that, they say, was used for dirty business in the 90s. I was told that before being bought by Rutherford, the place served as a warehouse for the local cartel. Executions, torture, rituals, rumors. Nothing confirmed, of course. I didn't know any of this when I accepted the job. I just needed the money. The shift was simple. Patrol the perimeter, check the sensors, contact the supervisor once an hour. The first week was normal. Cold, silence, boredom. But on Saturday night, I started hearing footsteps on the roof, slow, dragging, as if someone was walking with heavy boots. But the roof was made of zinc and was high as hell, about 10 meters, 33 feet, without an external ladder. I went out with the flashlight, circled the whole thing. Nothing. I thought it was just the sound of the metal contracting in the cold. The next night, at 2:47 a.m., I heard screams, coming from inside the factory. Long, high-pitched, humanly high-pitched. I searched everything with the flashlight. No sign of forced entry, no animals, not a soul. But on the third night, the thing appeared. It was leaning behind one of the deactivated machines, watching me. Half of the body visible. The skin looked like it was made of dried-out rubber. The eyes sunken. The mouth, it barely had one. When I illuminated it with the flashlight, it disappeared, but I felt it. A freezing presence in the air, as if the oxygen had been drained from the place. And then came the voice, raspy, raw, coming from some corner of the factory that I couldn't identify. I am God. I almost left my soul there. I fell to my knees. I tried to speak. I tried to run. I could only walk backwards, slowly, murmuring a prayer that I didn't even remember knowing. I ran out of the factory like a madman. I locked myself in the booth and cried like a child. I stayed there until the sun came up. The next day, a mechanic from the city who worked there in the morning called me at the bar. "You saw it too, didn't you?" I didn't answer. He said that they had already lost 3 security guards that year alone. That the place, before being a factory, had been a center for silent executions of the cartel. That they buried bodies under the concrete. That they made sacrifices. They called that thing an altar, he said, pointing to the center of the factory. I don't know if it was delirium or truth. I only know what I saw. And even today, on some early mornings, when the world is too quiet, I hear that voice again. I am God. If you work in security and you're offered a position in an isolated facility, ask where it was built. And if the roof starts flickering under the moonlight, as if something is walking on top of you, get out of there. Not everything that walks in the darkness is human, and not every God is worthy of worship. I don't know how much longer I can keep this job. I was hired a week ago as a night security guard at the Clearwater Mall in Brooksville, Oregon. Old, rundown mall, but still functioning, especially with Black Friday coming up. The manager seemed normal until he made me sign a non-disclosure agreement. I didn't think much of it, but I should have. My routine is quiet. Check cameras, patrol the first and second floors, lock access to the elevators after 2 a.m. But there's one store that's had me on edge since the first shift. Store 216, a fast fashion place with trendy clothes and too modern for the standards here. The store is always full of mannequins, hyper-realistic models, silicone skin, pores, expressions, Some even have eyelashes. Seriously, my first sign that something was wrong came on the second night shift. It was almost 2:30 a.m. when I saw movement on the camera in store 216. A flash, a blur. I zoomed in. Nothing. But I thought it was a thief, so I went to check. The store was locked with the metal grates closed. Everything dark, but the mannequins. I could have sworn that one of them had changed position. It was sitting down on the first shift. Now it was standing, facing me. I went back to the post, trembling, trying to convince myself that it was my imagination, but it wasn't. The next night, I heard electronic whispers coming from the second floor. You know when it sounds like an old radio is trying to pick up a signal, but distorted, like a robotic voice trying to imitate a human. I went up there, and the whispers stopped. I hid behind a pillar and watched store 216 from afar. One of the mannequins slowly turned its head, looked straight at me, and smiled. I ran like a coward. Yes, I locked myself in the monitoring room, breathing uneven. But when I looked at the cameras again, they were all there, standing in front of the window, all the mannequins, smiling and waving. It was impossible. I reviewed the system. No alarm of forced entry, no human movement captured. But that wasn't human. The last straw was on my fourth shift, 3:17 a.m. The store appeared on the camera, but ... different. The lighting was brighter than it should have been, and there was only one mannequin there, sitting with its arms open as if waiting for a hug. In its hand, something white. I zoomed in. It was a pair of glass eyes, the same ones that are usually in the heads of the mannequins. But this one no longer had eyes. And even so, it was looking at me, as if it knew I was there. I have never run as fast in my life as on the following morning when my shift ended. I told the janitor, a Mexican man named Mr. Roses. He just told me, "Not your first night, eh? You're not the first to see." He said that other security guards had also left scared, talking about the same things, and that store 216 was already closed in the 2000s, after a child disappeared inside during business hours. The girl was found hours later, hidden behind the mannequins, crying. She said that one of them had spoken to her. He asked for my eyes. The mall covered everything up, reopened the store with another name, and now they pretend that none of this exists. I quit today. I won't go back there, but I leave this here as a warning. If you go to Clearwater Mall and pass by store 216, don't look in the eyes of the mannequins, because if you look for too long, they will smile, and when they smile, it will be too late. My name is Miguel. I'm Mexican. I've lived in the US for over 20 years, and this is one of those stories that I could only tell now, with a lot of time and therapy afterwards. In 2012, I was hired as a night security guard on a rural property in the Pennsylvania countryside, near a nearly forgotten road called Route 43. The place was called Red Hollow Estate. Officially, it was rented out for luxury events, weddings, parties, corporate retreats. But that place had bad energy from the first day. I found out later that that land was the headquarters of a kind of religious court in past centuries, an informal branch of the Inquisition that, yes, operated secretly in the US for a while, away from the eyes of the world. The stories, executions, torture, burning at the stake. But when I took the job, I didn't know any of that. I just wanted to work. The property was huge, old. The wood creaked as if it was always complaining about your presence. There was a building in the back, somewhat removed. They called it the old shed, but it was clearly a renovated temple. It all started in my first week. I was sitting in the security booth when I saw a figure walking across the yard. It was late at night, dark. There were no events scheduled. I went out to check. The figure entered the old shed, went up the outside stairs. I followed, thinking it was some drunk guest or a drug addict trying to hide. When I got to the stairs, I saw it, a man in a long robe, standing at the top, without a face, just a dense shadow, as if there was nothing inside the hood. The flashlight slipped from my hand. He didn't move. He just kept going up until he disappeared inside. That was just the beginning. In the following nights, I heard muffled screams coming from the back of the shed. Screams of pain, of despair. Human screams. At first, I would check. Nothing, after a while. I just prayed and kept to myself. One night, I saw a woman in a black dress walking between the windows on the top floor. She would disappear through one window and reappear in the next, on a loop, repeating the path as if trapped in an eternal routine. On one of the strangest nights, a team was holding a graduation event. Quiet. 2 girls came screaming from the women's bathroom. They said that someone was crying, locked in one of the stalls. When they crouched down to see the feet, they saw old sandals and a black robe under the door. They called for help. When we went to see, the bathroom was empty, but you could still hear the crying. There was also a boy at a children's party who disappeared for a few minutes. When they found him, he was coming out of the second floor of the shed, where everything was supposed to be locked. He said that a nice monk had called him to play rope. That was my last warning. I said goodbye to that property shortly after. Years later, I met another security guard who worked there. He told me that, sometimes, when turning off the spotlights, you could see silhouettes hanging in the windows of the shed, and that the name Red Hollow was an old nickname, from the time of the executions, where red was the blood and hollow was the place where souls were emptied. No one should celebrate anything there, but they still rent out the place. The last time I passed by, I saw a wedding happening. Balloons, music, happy people. But in the back, on the second floor of the shed, a black figure watched from the window, waiting, and I know she's still there.